Before we begin, understand this. The Orient are not just running from death, they are running from something far worse. A dominion that can erase names, histories, songs, families, and even the proof that a civilization ever existed. And in the middle of that collapse, one archivist named Salavon is carrying the last fragile memory of her people.
The first child forgot her own name while the stars behind her burned. Sela Vorn caught the little girl before she collapsed in the corridor of the refugee ship, but the child's eyes had already gone empty with terror. Around them, alarms screamed through the broken decks of the last Oryn convoy. Red emergency lights flashed over cracked walls, bleeding wires, and families pressed against bulkheads with their hands over their ears as another ship behind them vanished from the tracking screen without an explosion, without debris, without even a final distress call. It was simply removed. Sela looked down at the archive tablet locked against her chest and watched 112 names turn gray. Not dead. Not missing. Erased. The Dominion of Ash had reached the rear of the convoy again, and their erasure drones were doing what their warships always did best. They were not only killing the Oryn, they were deleting the proof that the Oryn had ever lived. The captain's voice cracked over the shipwide channel. The jump lanes are collapsing. All vessels, maintain formation. Do not break toward open space. Nobody obeyed. 3 civilian ships panicked and turned away from the convoy, trying to scatter into the dark. Sela saw their icons flare bright on the tactical wall for half a breath. Then Dominion lances cut across the void like white knives, and the ships became static. A moment later, their registry codes disappeared from every screen. Their crews, their families, their birth records, their songs, their recorded voices, all of it dissolved into blank data. The child in Sela's arms began whispering sounds that should have been a name, but each syllable broke apart before it became meaning. Sela pressed her trembling fingers to the girl's forehead and opened the emergency memory seal. One by one, she forced the child's identity back into the archive before the Dominion's plague could finish eating it. Daughter of Maine. Born under the 7th moon. Loved blue rain. The tablet accepted the record. The girl gasped as if dragged from deep water, and for one terrible second, Sela felt hope. Then the ship shook so hard that the corridor lights died. Beyond the forward glass, the last escape route appeared, a ring of black stars where no sane fleet had flown in 3 centuries. The Black Meridian waited ahead, silent and enormous, its boundary marked by dead human warning buoys older than the Dominion itself. Their surfaces were scarred, frozen, and covered in the same message repeated in hundreds of extinct languages. Do not wake what sleeps here. The captain did not ask for permission. The Dominion was behind them. Erasure was already inside their systems. Their homeworld was ash. Their libraries were gone. Their dead were disappearing faster than Sela could save their names. The refugee convoy crossed the boundary. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then every dead human buoy opened its eyes. The moment the convoy crossed into the Black Meridian, silence replaced the chaos. Not peace. Not safety. A silence so absolute it felt like the universe had stopped listening. The alarms died first. Then the static. Then even the distant tremor of Dominion pursuit seemed to fall away, as if sound itself refused to exist inside this region. Sela realized it only when the child in her arms tried to speak again and no voice came out. The girl's lips moved, her chest rose, but the air carried nothing. The ship had not lost atmosphere. It had lost something deeper. Something that made sound matter. Then the buoys spoke. Not through speakers. Not through transmission channels. The message arrived directly into the ship systems, rewriting itself across every screen, every sensor grid, every fragment of functioning code. It translated itself instantly, perfectly, into the Oryn tongue. Entry acknowledged. No threat detected. Memory systems active. Sela felt her breath catch. Around her, others stared in disbelief as the dead relics of human space began to move. Not violently. Not like weapons. Slowly. Deliberately. As if something vast had just awakened and was choosing not to rush. The forward view brightened. The darkness of the meridian was not empty space. It was structure. Vast orbital rings hung around dead stars like broken halos. Shipyards the size of continents drifted in frozen alignment. Fleets, thousands of vessels, sat suspended in perfect formation, their hulls scarred, blackened, but intact, as if they had been waiting for a command that never came. And yet, none of them fired. None of them reacted to the Oryn. They simply watched. The captain's voice returned, strained and disbelieving. All ships hold position. Do not engage. Do not transmit. We do not know what triggers these systems. But something had already been triggered. Sela's archive tablet vibrated against her chest. At first, she thought it was another Dominion corruption spike. But when she pulled it free and looked down, her hands began to shake. Names were returning. Not all. Not completely. But fragments, partial identities, broken records, corrupted lines, were being reconstructed. Files that had been erased moments ago were reappearing, stitched together from nothing. The system was not restoring them from backup. There were no backups left. It was rebuilding them. From memory. Sela's heart pounded as she watched Lyra's entry stabilize, her identity no longer flickering on the edge of oblivion. Around her, other archivists began shouting, silent at first, then sound returned in a sudden rush as if the Meridian allowed it again. They're coming back. Records are stabilizing. It's rebuilding the lost data. No one understood how. No one dared ask why. The convoy drifted deeper into the Meridian, and the Dominion followed. Their ships did not hesitate at the boundary. They never did. The Dominion of Ash did not believe in warnings, myths, or forbidden zones. They believed in absence. In clean, perfect erasure. In a galaxy where only their version of history remained. The first Dominion vessel crossed into the Meridian and immediately lost its formation alignment. Its engines stuttered, recalibrating against unknown gravitational patterns. The second ship collided with a dormant human structure and shattered against its surface like fragile glass. But the rest adapted. They always adapted. Within seconds, Dominion warships reformed their advance, their hulls glowing with the familiar white energy of erasure lances. Their commander did not slow, did not question, did not consider retreat. To him, this was just another place to clean. The first shot inside the Black Meridian did not explode. It erased. A refugee transport at the edge of the convoy flickered once and vanished. Not into debris, not into fire, but into absence. Its signal, its crew, its history, all gone in a single pulse. Sela felt it physically this time. A pressure inside her skull, like something trying to pull her own memories apart. She dropped to her knees, clutching the archive. "Hold it together," she whispered, not to herself, but to the names inside the tablet. Stay with me." The Meridian responded. Lights ignited across the dead structures. Not weapons. Not yet. Pathways. Guidance vectors unfolded through space, forming invisible corridors between the ruins. The refugee convoy's navigation systems lit up with routes they had never mapped, leading them deeper, safer, hidden. But the Dominion saw them too. And now the hunt had direction. The captain hesitated for only a second before issuing the order. "Follow the paths. All ships." The convoy moved. They were no longer fleeing blindly. They were being guided. Sela stared at the impossible data streaming across her archive. The system that was rebuilding her people's identities was not random. It was learning, adapting, responding specifically to the damage the Dominion inflicted. It understood erasure, which meant one thing. This was not the first time something like the Dominion had come here. Behind them, the Dominion fleet accelerated, adjusting its weapons, refining its algorithms, preparing to wipe the Oryn completely before whatever ancient intelligence controlled the Meridian decided to act.
So far, Celadon and the Oryn convoy have fled into the forbidden Black Meridian, a region surrounded by ancient human warning buoys that say, "Do not wake but sleeps here." The Dominion has followed them inside, still hunting, still erasing, but now the Meridian is rebuilding lost names from memory itself. Something human, ancient, and powerful has noticed the Orient. but it has not fully acted yet, and that silence may be more terrifying than any weapon.
And at the very center of the region, something enormous shifted for the first time in centuries. Sela didn't see it, but her archive did. A signal older than any living memory began to wake. The deeper the convoy moved into the Black Meridian, the more the silence changed. It was no longer empty. It was listening. Sela felt it in the way the archive responded before she touched it, in the way damaged records began repairing themselves without command, in the way the ship's sensors stopped searching and simply waited, as if expecting something to arrive. The Meridian was not reacting randomly. It was studying them, and it was learning fast. The pathways guiding the convoy twisted through impossible structures, rings within rings, skeletal shipyards suspended between broken stars, corridors of drifting debris that arranged themselves just enough to conceal movement without blocking it. Every turn they took felt deliberate, protective but not gentle. The Meridian did not cradle them. It hit them. Behind them, the Dominion adapted just as quickly. Their fleet spread into smaller formations, abandoning rigid structure for fluid pursuit. Erasure pulses no longer fired blindly. They targeted navigation routes, cutting off escape paths before the refugees reached them. Entire corridors collapsed into emptiness as Dominion weapons erased sections of space itself, turning safe routes into dead ends. The hunt had become intelligent. Inside the refugee ships, fear shifted into something sharper. Not panic. Not yet. Something colder. The understanding that running alone would not save them. Sela moved through the crowded interior of the flagship, the archive tablet clutched to her chest as if it were a living thing. Around her, families whispered names to each other, repeating them over and over like a fragile shield against the Dominion's reach. Myra, Myra, Myra. Don't forget me. Say it again. Every name spoken was a small act of defiance. Every name recorded was a victory the Dominion could not fully erase. Sela reached the central archive chamber, where the surviving archivists had gathered around a projection field that flickered with unstable data. Names, histories, fragments of culture, all shifting in and out of existence as the Meridian's unknown system attempted to rebuild what had been lost. It's not just restoring, one of the archivists said, her voice shaking. It's predicting. Filling gaps we didn't even record. That's impossible, another replied. You can't rebuild a culture from partial data. Sela stared at the projection. The system wasn't guessing randomly. It was reconstructing patterns, family lines, linguistic structures, emotional markers embedded in memory logs. It was rebuilding identity the way a living mind would. Which meant it wasn't just a system. It was something closer to a memory itself. And it had seen this before. The ship trembled as a distant impact rippled through the Meridian. Not close. Not yet. But close enough to remind them that the Dominion had not slowed. They're not afraid, the captain said quietly from the chamber entrance. They don't believe the stories. Sela turned to him. Do you? He hesitated. I believe we are still running. That answer settled over the room like a weight. The Meridian had not attacked. It had not defended them. It had only observed. And guided. Sela looked back at the projection, at the broken names slowly knitting themselves back together. If this place had once faced something like the Dominion, if it had built systems to counter erasure, then why was it still waiting? What was it waiting for? The answer came without warning. A signal burst through the chamber, overriding every system, every display, every fragment of code. It did not come from the Dominion. It came from within the Meridian. A question. Simple. Precise. Repeated across every language the archive could recognize. Extinction status? Sela felt the words hit her like a physical force. Not a greeting. Not a warning. A classification. Around her, the archivists froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Because they all understood what the question meant. The Meridian was not asking if they were in danger. It was asking if they were already gone. Before anyone could respond, the Dominion answered for them. A wave of erasure fire tore through the outer edge of the convoy, faster than anything they had seen before. 3 ships vanished in perfect silence, their signals collapsing into nothing. This time, the Meridian's pathways reacted too slowly. Or not at all. Seela screamed as her archive flickered violently. Entire clusters of names dissolved before her eyes, too damaged to reconstruct, too fragmented to recover. "They're accelerating," someone shouted. "They're targeting the archive carriers." The Dominion had changed tactics. They were no longer chasing the convoy. They were hunting the memory. Seela's hands trembled as she forced the archive to stabilize what little it could. But for every name she saved, 2 more slipped away. The Meridian system struggled, trying to keep up, but the Dominion's erasure was evolving faster than the reconstruction. This was not a battle of weapons. It was a race between memory and oblivion. And oblivion was winning. A small voice broke through the chaos. Seela looked down. The child from before, Lyra, stood beside her, her face pale but her eyes clear. She held onto Seela's sleeve with shaking fingers. "Will they forget us again?" she asked. Seela opened her mouth. No answer came. Because for the first time, she didn't know if memory would be enough. Lyra stepped forward before Seela could stop her. The girl moved to the center of the chamber, where the projection field pulsed with unstable light. Her small hands reached out, touching the air where broken names flickered in and out of existence. Then she did something no one expected. She spoke. Not to Seela. Not to the archivists. But to the Meridian itself. "My name is Lyra," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I don't want to disappear." The chamber fell silent. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the projection froze. Every flickering name stabilized at once. And deep within the Black Meridian, something ancient shifted its attention completely. The moment Lyra spoke, the Meridian stopped pretending to be asleep. The projection field did not flicker again. Every fractured name held steady, suspended in a clarity that felt unnatural after so much loss. Seela stared at the archive, waiting for the collapse to return, for the Dominion's reach to tear it apart again, but nothing moved. The system had locked the data in place as if it had decided, finally, that hesitation was no longer acceptable. Then the rest of the Meridian began to wake. Across the void, structures that had drifted for centuries rotated with slow, deliberate purpose. Dead shipyards aligned themselves along unseen axes. Broken rings sealed their fractures, rejoining like bones knitting under invisible hands. Even the ancient warning buoys, which had only watched until now, turned outward, no longer facing the refugees, but the approaching Dominion fleet. The silence changed again. This time, it felt like breath being drawn. The Dominion answered with fire. They did not pause to analyze. They did not retreat. High Executor Mal Reth had built his empire on the certainty that anything which resisted could be erased, and anything that could be erased did not deserve to exist. The Meridian, in all its quiet defiance, was simply another obstacle. His fleet surged forward. Erasure lances burned across space in controlled bursts, carving entire pathways out of existence before the refugees could use them. Where the Meridian created safe corridors, the Dominion cut them apart, forcing the convoy into tighter, more desperate routes. Each pulse did more than destroy. It removed. Entire segments of space lost their reference points, turning navigation into guesswork and survival into probability. Seela felt the pressure inside her mind again, sharper now, more focused. The Dominion was not just attacking ships anymore. It was reaching into the archive itself, targeting identity clusters, trying to collapse entire bloodlines at once. "They've isolated the archive signatures," one of the archivists said, panic breaking through her voice. "They know where we are." Of course they did. The Dominion did not need to see the refugees to find them. It only needed to follow what was being remembered. Seela tightened her grip on the tablet, as if she could shield it with her body. Around her, the archivists scrambled to redistribute data, fracturing the archive into smaller segments, hiding pieces across multiple systems to slow the loss. It was a desperate tactic. It meant no single device held a complete truth anymore. But it might buy time. "Keep them alive," Seela whispered, not to the others, but to the names. "Just a little longer." The Meridian responded again. Not with weapons. With alignment. The pathways changed. Corridors that had once guided the convoy gently now snapped into rigid vectors, forcing ships into precise formations whether they were ready or not. Some vessels nearly collided as the system recalculated their trajectories without warning. Others were pushed into narrow channels between massive structures where even minor error meant destruction. "This isn't guidance anymore," the captain said, gripping the command rail as the ship lurched into a tighter arc. "It's control." And control meant intent. Ahead of them, a colossal structure emerged from the darkness. At first, it looked like a broken star, its surface jagged and incomplete. But as the convoy approached, Sela realized it was something else entirely. A monument. Not to victory. Not to power. To absence. Its surface was covered in engraved patterns that resembled language but shifted too fast to read. Lines flowed into symbols, symbols into names, names into fragments of memory. It was a record, but not of one species. Of many. The Meridian was not a graveyard. It was an archive. The Dominion saw it too. And for the first time since the invasion began, their formation hesitated. Only for a second. Then Mal-Reth gave the order. Erase it. The Dominion fleet concentrated its fire on the monument. Dozens of erasure beams converged, striking the structure with enough force to remove entire planetary masses from existence. Space itself warped under the assault, folding inward as the Dominion attempted to delete the monument from reality. For a moment, it worked. The edges of the structure began to dissolve, its surface fragmenting into nothingness. Names vanished. Patterns collapsed. Entire sections of the archive disappeared in a silent wave of annihilation. Sela screamed. Not in fear. In rage. "They're killing them again." The archive tablet in her hands flared with light, reacting violently to the loss. Data cascaded across the screen faster than she could process, trying to compensate, trying to rebuild, trying to hold on to what was slipping away. But this time, the Meridian did not remain passive. The monument changed. The surface that had been dissolving hardened, its structure shifting from fragile record into something denser, reinforced. The patterns did not disappear. They sank inward, embedding themselves deeper, beyond the reach of the Dominion's weapons. And then the structure answered. Not with a beam. With a question. Every Dominion ship, every system, every weapon interface was overridden for a single instant. Their targeting displays went dark, replaced by a message they could not block, could not ignore. Extinction confirmed? Mal-Reth did not hesitate. Yes. The answer was transmitted across every frequency, every channel, every layer of space. He did not care if it was a trap. He did not care if it was a test. To him, the Oryn were already gone. And with that answer, something fundamental inside the Meridian shifted. The lights went out. Not flickering. Not failing. Gone. Every structure, every pathway, every system that had guided the refugees fell into absolute darkness. The convoy sensors collapsed into static. Navigation grids vanished. Even the distant glow of the Dominion fleet disappeared, swallowed by a void so complete it felt like the universe itself had been turned off. For a heartbeat, nothing existed. No sound. No light. No direction. Sela felt her pulse hammer in her ears as she clutched the archive, the only thing still alive in the emptiness. Around her, voices rose in panic, but they sounded distant, muffled, as if reality itself had been stripped down to its barest layer. "What did you do?" someone whispered. No one answered, because they all felt it. This was not death. This was a decision. And somewhere in that endless dark, far beyond the reach of any sensor, something ancient and patient finished waking. The darkness did not lift. It organized. Sela realized it slowly, through the only thing that still responded, the archive in her hands. Where the ship sensors showed nothing, the tablet showed everything. Not stars, not ships, not space. Structure. Movement. Intent. Lines of data spread outward from the monument like roots through soil, mapping a system that did not rely on light to exist. The Black Meridian had not gone dark. It had changed the rules. Around the convoy, space itself reassembled into a grid of silent coordinates. Old human pathways, once visible as luminous corridors, were now something deeper, embedded into the fabric of the region. The refugees were no longer being guided by visible routes. They were being positioned. Seela felt her breath catch as she understood the difference. Guidance was protection. Positioning was preparation. The archive pulsed again, stronger this time, no longer struggling to rebuild the lost. It had stopped reacting to the Dominion entirely. Instead, it synchronized with the Meridian, accepting streams of data far older than the Oryn had ever recorded. Names, millions of them, flooded through the system, not just Oryn, not just recent dead, but species Seela had never heard of. Entire civilizations, catalogued, preserved, structured into something far beyond memory. This was not a defensive system. This was a vault. And it had just been opened. Across the void, something moved. At first, Seela thought it was her imagination, a distortion in the archive's interpretation of empty space. But then the data stabilized, and she saw it clearly, not through the viewport, but through the system that had awakened around them. Chips. Not drifting relics. Not broken husks. Active. They did not ignite with light. They did not announce themselves with energy signatures. They simply dark silhouettes sliding into alignment with a precision that felt unnatural, as if they had never truly been dormant, only waiting for the right condition to become visible again. Thousands of them. Scarred. Built without elegance, without ceremony, without any attempt at beauty. Every line of their structure spoke of purpose. Violence. The first Dominion ship died without a shot being fired. One moment, it existed inside the grid. The next, it was gone, not erased like the Dominion's victims, but dismantled. Its systems shut down, its structure fragmented, its mass scattered into inert debris that drifted without cohesion. The difference was immediate, undeniable. The Dominion removed things from existence. This unmade them. Confusion rippled through the Dominion formation. Their ships attempted to reacquire targets, to recalibrate sensors, to fire blindly into the dark. But the Meridian no longer allowed blind movement. Every attempt to reposition triggered invisible constraints, forcing their fleet into narrower formations, compressing them, limiting their range. They were being shaped, herded, hunted. Inside the refugee convoy, silence fell as Seela and the others watched the archive render what the eye could not see. The human fleet was not engaging in a battle. It was executing a sequence. Each movement precise. Each adjustment calculated. Each action building toward something larger than simple destruction. The Dominion fired again. Erasure beams lanced through the dark, targeting the closest known coordinates of the convoy. For a fraction of a second, Seela felt the familiar pressure, the pull of memory unraveling, the threat of names dissolving. Then it stopped. The beams did not vanish. They were redirected, folded into the grid itself and carried away, their energy stripped of purpose and returned as nothing. Seela stared in disbelief. The Meridian had not blocked the attack. It had absorbed it, adapted to it, learned from it. The archive pulsed once more, and this time, a translation emerged, not a question, not a fragment, but a record. Human origin classification, self-contained conflict resolution domain. Seela frowned, struggling to interpret the phrasing. Conflict resolution. Domain. It did not sound like a battlefield. It sounded like a designated space. A place built for war. The realization settled over her like cold water. This was not where humanity had hidden from the galaxy. This was where humanity had chosen to fight. The data stream expanded, feeding her fragments of ancient records, preserved not as stories, but as structured memory. Long ago, before the Meridian fell silent, humanity had encountered an enemy that did not simply kill. It erased. Entire species vanished from history, their existence reduced to statistical absence. The war that followed had consumed entire sectors, forcing humanity to create weapons that could counter erasure itself. Weapons that did not destroy. Weapons that prevented disappearance. And when the war ended, when humanity stood victorious, they did something no other species had ever done. They stopped. They sealed this place. They left the machines. And they walked away. Not because they were weak. Because they understood what they had built. Sela's hands trembled as the final fragment of the record resolved. Primary directive retained. In the event of confirmed extinction event, respond. The words settled into the archive like a heartbeat. Across the meridian, the human fleet completed its alignment. For the first time since the darkness fell, a signal moved outward, not from the Dominion, not from the refugees, but from the oldest structure at the center of the domain. It reached every system, every ship, every fragment of data. A single transmission. Not a threat. Not a command. A declaration. Memorial sequence initiated. And in that moment, Sela understood something that made her blood run cold. The humans had not come to save them. They had come because the Dominion had already declared them dead. The moment the declaration spread through the meridian, the battlefield changed from pursuit to judgment. Sela felt it before she fully understood it. The archive no longer trembled under Dominion pressure. It stabilized completely, its structure locking into something far stronger than fragile memory. Every name that remained was anchored, protected, held in a system that did not allow partial existence anymore. There would be no more fading, no more slipping between presence and absence. Either a name survived, or it was recorded as lost. There was no middle ground. Outside the ship, the human fleet began to move in earnest. Not fast, not aggressive, relentless. The dark vessels advanced in perfect synchronization, each movement anticipating the Dominion's response before it happened. They did not scatter or rush. They closed in gradually, tightening invisible lines around the Dominion formation, forcing the enemy into smaller and smaller pockets of space. The Dominion reacted with everything they had. Erasure weapons fired continuously now, not in measured pulses but in desperate waves, attempting to overwhelm the grid, to collapse the structure of the meridian before it could fully engage. Entire regions of space flickered as the Dominion tried to tear the battlefield apart. But the meridian had already adapted. Every erasure pulse was captured, analyzed, and redirected. Some were dissipated into nothing. Others were reflected back in altered forms, stripped of their original purpose and turned into inert energy. The more the Dominion fired, the more the system learned. The more it learned, the less effective the Dominion became. "They're losing control," one of the archivists whispered, watching the archive render the shifting positions. "Their weapons are degrading." Sela shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "They're being understood." The difference mattered. The Dominion had built their empire on a weapon no one else could counter. They had never needed to adapt to resistance at this level. They had never faced something that could not only survive erasure, but study it in real time. Now they were facing something that had been built for exactly this. The human fleet was not improvising. It was remembering. Across the grid, Dominion ships began to fail in sequence. Not destroyed outright, not erased, but systematically disabled. Engines shut down. Targeting systems locked. Communication arrays collapsed into static. One by one, ships lost the ability to act, drifting helplessly within the tightening formation. It was not a battle of destruction. It was a process of removal. The Dominion commander, High Executor Mal Reth, refused to accept it. His flagship surged forward, breaking formation in a direct attempt to reach the center of the meridian. If he could destroy the core, the structure coordinating the system, he could collapse the entire response. "Focus fire on the central node," he ordered. "Ignore all other targets." His fleet obeyed. For the first time since entering the meridian, the Dominion stopped hunting the refugees. They targeted the system itself. Sela saw the shift instantly. The archive highlighted the change in vector, the concentration of firepower, the narrowing of the Dominion's intent. "They're going for the core," she said, her voice tightening. "If they reach it..." The captain didn't let her finish. "All ships, adjust course. We stay inside the grid. Do not break formation." "But if the core falls..." "It won't," he said. Sela wanted to believe him. But the archive told a different story. The core, the ancient monument at the center of the meridian, was not invulnerable. It had already taken damage. Its outer layers had adapted, hardened, but sustained enough concentrated fire could still destabilize it. And if it fell before the memorial sequence completed, the system would lose its anchor. The names would be at risk again. The thought hit Sela like a physical blow. This was never just about surviving the Dominion. It was about finishing the record before the Dominion could erase it completely. "They're not trying to win," she whispered. The archivist beside her looked at her in confusion. "What?" "They're trying to finish us before the system finishes remembering." The realization spread through the chamber like cold fire. The Dominion understood. Maybe not fully, maybe not in detail, but they knew enough. If the memorial sequence completed, the Oryn would exist again in a way that could not be erased. So they were racing it. And for the first time since the Meridian awakened, the outcome was uncertain. The human fleet adjusted. Their formation shifted subtly, intercepting Dominion advances with precision, but not fully blocking them. Some Dominion ships were allowed to slip through gaps, moving closer to the core. Sela's heart pounded as she watched it unfold. "Why are they letting them through?" someone demanded. The answer came slowly. Because it wasn't a mistake. It was part of the sequence. The Dominion ships that broke through did not reach the core unchallenged. They were isolated, separated from their fleet, drawn into narrow corridors where the grid tightened around them. One by one, they were dismantled, their systems stripped, their weapons neutralized. But each one got closer than the last. Each one forced the system to respond faster, harder, more aggressively. The pressure was increasing. The Meridian was being pushed. And something within it was changing. Sela felt it in the archive first. A new layer of data began to surface, deeper than the preserved records, older than the war fragments. It was not part of the memorial sequence. It was something else. Something restricted. Her fingers hovered over the interface, hesitation freezing her for a moment. Then she accessed it. The data unfolded instantly. Containment protocol, inactive. Escalation authorization, pending. Final measure, blocked. Sela's breath caught. This was not part of the system's normal response. This was what humanity had buried. She looked up at the projection, at the tightening grid, at the Dominion ships pushing closer and closer to the core. "They're forcing it," she said, her voice barely audible. "Forcing what?" the captain asked. Sela didn't answer immediately, because she wasn't sure she wanted to say it out loud. Finally, she did. "They're trying to make the system remember how to end a war." The chamber fell silent. Outside, the Dominion launched another concentrated strike, their most powerful yet, aimed directly at the heart of the Meridian. The grid trembled. The monument flickered. And deep within the system, something long sealed began to unlock. The strike hit the heart of the Meridian like a blade driven into something that refused to die. For the first time since the awakening, the monument did not absorb the impact cleanly. The grid shuddered, its perfect geometry fracturing along invisible seams as Dominion fire forced its way deeper than anything before. Entire sections of the structure dimmed, not destroyed, but strained, as if pushed to the edge of something it had been built never to cross again. Sela felt it in the archive immediately. Names flickered. Not vanishing. Not erased. But destabilizing, like memories being pulled too tightly between preservation and loss. The system that had held them so firmly began to strain under the pressure of something greater than simple defense. "They're breaking it," someone whispered. "No," Sela said, though her voice trembled. "They're forcing it to choose." Outside, the Dominion pressed harder. Malreth's flagship surged through the narrowing corridors, pushing past the wreckage of his own fleet without hesitation. His remaining ships followed in a fractured wave, abandoning coordination entirely in favor of raw force. They did not care about survival anymore. They cared about completion. Erase the core. Erase the record. Finish the extinction. The human fleet responded, but differently. Their movements, once smooth and inevitable, began to change. The precision remained, but the restraint was thinning. Ships that had once disabled now began to destroy. Targets that had been carefully isolated were eliminated outright. The methodical hunt shifted toward something faster, sharper, more final. The Meridian was adapting. Or remembering. Seela's eyes locked on the restricted data stream she had uncovered. The deeper protocols were no longer dormant. They were waking, layer by layer, triggered by the escalating threat to the memorial sequence. Containment had failed. Escalation was being considered. She felt a cold realization settle in her chest. If the system reached its final measure, this would no longer be a defense. It would become the thing humanity had buried. "Stop it," one of the archivists said, her voice breaking. "We don't need that. The fleet is winning." "They're not winning fast enough," Seela replied. The Dominion proved it in the next moment. A spearhead formation broke through the grid. Fewer ships than before, but faster, more aggressive, driven by a singular objective. They ignored every defensive response, every loss, every interception, burning straight toward the monument with weapons charging to maximum output. "They're going to hit it again," the captain said. Seela didn't respond. Because she was watching something else. The archive. The names. They were stabilizing again, but not because the system was holding them. Because it was finishing them. The memorial sequence was accelerating. Every fragment, every broken identity, every lost record was being pulled together at a speed that bordered on violent. The system was no longer gently reconstructing memory. It was locking it into permanence. At any cost. "Why now?" someone asked. Seela answered without looking away. "Because it thinks we're already gone." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. The Meridian was not fighting to save them. It was completing the record of their extinction before the Dominion could erase it completely. That was the priority. That was the directive. Everything else was secondary. The Dominion ships reached firing range. Weapons ignited, brighter than anything before, carrying enough power to tear the core apart in a single coordinated strike. Even the human fleet could not intercept all of them in time. The grid tightened, compressing space, bending trajectories, forcing angles that should have been impossible. But it wasn't enough. The first beam hit. The monument cracked. Not shattered. Cracked. A fracture ran across its surface, slicing through layers of embedded memory, exposing deeper structures beneath. Seela felt it like a wound inside her own mind as a cluster of names faltered, struggling to hold together under the damage. The second beam followed. The crack widened. The archive screamed in her hands, data surging beyond safe limits as the system fought to compensate, to preserve, to hold onto what it had just finished rebuilding. "We're losing them," an archivist cried. Seela clenched her jaw. "No," she said. "We're not." She didn't know if it was true. But she refused to accept the alternative. The third beam charged. This one would break it. She could feel it. The system knew it too. Deep within the Meridian, the final protocol unlocked. The restricted data stream flared open, no longer hidden, no longer waiting. Final measure, available. Authorization required. For a moment, everything else faded. The battle. The Dominion. The fleet. All of it reduced to a single decision. Seela stared at the interface, her heart pounding so hard it drowned out the chaos around her. She understood now. This was why humanity had left. Why they had sealed this place. Why they had never returned. Because this choice should never be easy. If she activated it, the Dominion would not survive. Not their fleet. Not their empire. Not their history. They would be erased in the same way they had erased others. Complete. Final. No one would remember them. Ever. The irony twisted in her chest. The perfect punishment. The perfect revenge. And the exact thing her people had been fighting against. The archivists looked at her. The captain looked at her. Even the child, Lyra, stood silently beside her, her small hand gripping Seela's sleeve. Waiting. Seela closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. And in that darkness, she heard the voices she had been carrying. Not screaming. Not begging. Remembering. She opened her eyes. The third beam fired. And at the exact same moment, a new signal cut through the Meridian. Human. Archive integrity acknowledged. Awaiting directive. Seela froze. The voice did not belong to the system. It belonged to someone who had been waiting for this moment.
The Dominion has pushed the Meridian to its breaking point. The monument has cracked, the final measure has unlocked, and Sarah has been offered the same terrible power the Dominion used against her people, complete erasure. But now, just as the final strike is about to destroy everything, a calm human voice has entered the battlefield. Someone has been watching from inside the Meridian all along, and the truth about humanity's buried war machine is finally about to be revealed.
Someone who had not left. The choice was no longer hers alone. The beam struck and stopped. Not deflected. Not absorbed. For a single impossible second, the Dominion's final strike hung suspended in space like a frozen blade inches from the monument's fractured surface. Every ship in the Meridian, human and Dominion alike, went still as the grid tightened around that moment, locking it in place as if time itself had been forced to hesitate. Then the voice spoke again. Not loud. Not commanding. Certain. Directive channel open. Sela felt the words pass through her, not heard but recognized. The archive reacted instantly, synchronizing with the signal, aligning her interface with something far older and far more precise than anything she had touched before. The chaotic data streams settled into clean structure. The restricted protocols no longer resisted her presence. She was not overriding the system. She was being invited into it. "Who are you?" the captain demanded, though his voice carried more awe than challenge. The answer came without hesitation. Custodian designation, Meridian authority. Human. Sela's breath caught. Not a fleet commander. Not a war leader. A caretaker. "They're still here," one of the archivists whispered. "Always were," the voice replied, as if the statement needed no explanation. The frozen beam collapsed, its energy unraveling harmlessly into nothing. Around it, the grid shifted, tightening further, compressing the Dominion's remaining forces into a shrinking sphere of trapped motion. Their weapons flickered, their systems fought to respond, but nothing could push against the control now imposed on the battlefield. For the first time since the chase began, the Dominion had nowhere left to move. Mal Reth stood on the bridge of his flagship, his claws digging into the command rail as every system around him resisted his commands. He had never seen a battlefield behave like this. War, to him, had always been simple. Power, control, erasure. Now, none of it obeyed. "What are you?" he demanded, broadcasting on every frequency, his voice filled with a fury that masked something deeper. The response did not come as a threat. It came as a record. "Extinction event confirmed," the human voice said calmly. "Victim classification, Oryn. Status, incomplete." Sela felt the archive surge, the memorial sequence accelerating one final time. Names locked into permanence, their structures finalizing, their histories sealing into a state that could no longer be altered, corrupted, or removed. Incomplete. Not gone. Not erased. The difference was everything. Mal Reth snarled. "You delay the inevitable. They are finished. We have already removed their world, their history, their—" "Incorrect," the voice interrupted. The word cut through his declaration with absolute precision. "You removed their presence," the human continued. "You did not remove their existence." The grid tightened again. Every Dominion ship shuddered as their systems were forced into alignment, their internal networks opened, their data exposed. For the first time, the Dominion's own archives, hidden, encrypted, protected, were no longer under their control. Sela stared as new data flooded into the Meridian. Not Oryn records. Dominion records. Campaign logs. Erasure confirmations. Classified histories of every civilization they had wiped from existence. Names, numbers, fragments of identity they had preserved only long enough to ensure deletion. The human system took it all. Not to destroy. To restore. "You sought to remove them from memory," the voice said. "Your error was believing memory requires your permission." Mal Reth's fury broke into desperation. "Destroy them," he roared to his crew. "Fire everything. Collapse the structure." His ships tried. Weapons charged. Systems strained. Commands were issued. Nothing happened. The Meridian did not block their actions. It denied them. Sela felt the shift before she understood it. The final protocol. It was no longer waiting. Authorization required. The system echoed within her interface. She knew what it meant. She knew what it offered. The power to erase the Dominion completely. To end their existence the way they had ended so many others. Final. Absolute. No survivors. No memory. No trace. The archivists looked at her again, just as they had before. The captain. The child. Even the human voice fell silent. Waiting. Sela's hands trembled over the interface. She thought of the homeworld that no longer existed. The libraries turned to dust. The voices that had been silenced mid-sentence. The names she had lost before she could save them. She thought of how easy it would be. One command. And the Dominion would never hurt anyone again. But they would also never remember. Never know what they had done. Never carry the weight of it. And in that moment, Sela understood something that went deeper than survival. Deeper than victory. If she erased them, she would be completing their work. Turning absence into the final truth. She lowered her hand. No, she said. The word echoed through the system, through the grid, through the human fleet itself. Malreth laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You are weak, he spat. You had the chance to end us. The human voice returned. Certain. Correction, it said. She had the chance to become you. The grid shifted one final time. The Dominion ships were not destroyed. They were opened. Their internal systems unfolded, their archives laid bare, their networks permanently linked to the Meridian. Data began to flow, not out of them, but into them. At first, Malreth did not understand. Then he saw Mims. Not his own. Not his people's. The Oryn. The civilizations before them. Every species the Dominion had erased. Every record they had tried to delete. Reconstructed. Complete. Permanent. And now. Unavoidable. What is this? He demanded, his voice cracking. Correction of imbalance, the human replied. You removed memory from the galaxy. You will now carry it. The data did not stop. It flooded through Dominion systems, embedding itself into every layer of their technology, their command structures, their communication networks. Every screen, every interface, every channel filled with the same thing. Memes. Histories. Voices. They could not delete them. They could not ignore them. They could not escape them. You will preserve what you attempted to erase, the human continued. You will transmit it. You will maintain it. Your empire will exist only as long as the truth does. Malreth staggered back, his strength draining as the weight of it settled in. This was worse than death. Sela exhaled slowly, her body trembling as the tension finally began to release. The archive in her hands stabilized completely, its structure complete, its contents secure. For the first time since the chase began, no names flickered. They were safe. Not alive. But not lost. Beside her, Lyra squeezed her hand. Will they remember us? The child asked softly. Sela looked at the projection, at the endless stream of restored identities now carried not just by the Meridian, but by the very empire that had tried to erase them. Yes, she said. The human voice spoke one final time. Memorial sequence complete. Across the Black Meridian, the darkness softened. The grid loosened, no longer a battlefield, but a network of quiet, enduring light. The ancient fleets slowed, their purpose fulfilled, returning to a state of watchful stillness rather than sleep. The war machines had not been unleashed. They had been used. Exactly as intended. Sela looked out at the silent expanse, at the structures that had once been feared as the galaxy's greatest threat. They were not monsters. They were guardians. And for the first time, the Meridian did not feel like a graveyard. It felt like a promise.
In the end, Sarah did not choose revenge, she chose memory. The Dominion wanted to turn the Orient into absence, but humanity's Meridian turned their crime into a burden they could never escape. Every name, every lost civilization, every erased voice would now live inside the empire that tried to delete them. That is the real power of this story. Survival is not only about staying alive. Sometimes survival means being remembered so completely that even your enemy must carry the truth forever. Thank you.